Hey y'all. So today I want to go over two different hand cannons that are competing for the best in slot kinetic option, and they are two very popular hand cannons, the Fatebringer and the Midnight Coup. One is a raid weapon, one is a former raid weapon, now onslaught weapon. So I want to show you which one you should grind for. So Fatebringer, let's evaluate that one first, just because it came out first, although, we have Midnight Coup from way back when, but that doesn't count. Fatebringer has the role of explosive payload with Firefly or Frenzy. Now, both perk rolls are phenomenal. With explosive payload and Firefly, you have the bonus of a flat damage buff, while also having extended reach and AoE explosions from Firefly. This means that no matter what level of content you're in, you have a damage bonus while also having an AoE bonus. And this is really good. Now, Firefly does tend to fall off a little bit in high-end contents. I'm talking about like raids, specifically master raids, not normal mode raids, and Grandmaster Nightfalls. But in some endgame content, it still works. For example, Crota's End on master mode, or even on the day one raid, Firefly on Fatebringer is still really good. There's a lot of Thrall, a lot of Acolytes. You can proc it, no biggie. Now, there is one other perk, Frenzy, and you can sub out Firefly for this. And this is definitely the better combination for most general endgame content, as you get a reload bonus and a flat 15% damage buff on top of explosive payload. Now, you do have to be in content for 12... you do have to be in combat for 12 seconds. My bad. But that's not too much of an ask, is it? Because you will always be in combat. Now, you can lose the buff, and it is a painful 12 seconds to proc the buff initially. But once you have it procced, the gun feels a lot better, and it does hit a little bit harder. Now, I want to compare this to Midnight Coup, just to get this started. Midnight Coup also has the same exact role of explosive payload in Frenzy. Midnight Coup's explosive payload in Frenzy is basically a flat-out upgrade over Fatebringer's. Why? Well, one, it has an origin trait. This origin trait gives you some amount of ability regen, whether it's your melee or grenade, depending on the subclass or super you have on. This is not a bad origin trait, and it does supply a noticeable amount of ability energy, but it's not so much that I would choose Midnight Coup over Fatebringer. However, what does make it more admirable is the fact that you can get enhanced perks. Now, I know the perks being enhanced are not exactly something to, go crazy about, but the fact that you can enhance it while also having an origin trait just means that if your goal is to get an explosive payload Frenzy hand cannon, don't waste your time getting the Fatebringer, because you can get one with Midnight Coup to enhance the perks and have an origin trait. However, that does not mean that Fatebringer is even Steven with Midnight Coup, because there is a role that is much better than the Fatebringer or Midnight Coup's Frenzy role, and that is One for All with Explosive Payload. Explosive Payload One for All basically has the same exact sort of style with endgame content, right? Where you don't need a single kill to proc a damage buff. The catch here is One for All, instead of being a 15% damage increase, is a 35% increase in damage. And it doesn't have that painful 12-second timer that Frenzy has. Furthermore, with explosive payload, in just one shot, you can proc One for All very easily against a group of ads. Not even that, you can proc it in 2 shots, whatever works. But either way, I would much rather waste 1 or 2 shots of my hand cannon to get a massive damage bonus than wait 12 seconds or have to use other weapons or abilities to get a 15% damage bonus. And if I lose it, I have to wait 12 more seconds. Now, One for All does have one downside, and that's a 10-second damage bonus. But that is a really long damage bonus in comparison to other damage perks. And you can proc it as soon as it runs out, and guess what? Just 1 or 2 shots. This is definitely the best hand cannon for endgame content, and Fatebringer with explosive payload and Frenzy does not touch One for All at all. Now, there is another role of Fatebringer that we need to sort of go over, because Frenzy is not the only option, right? We have Firefly, and Firefly Explosive Payload is the classic perk combo, and I would say that it is definitely the more desirable perk combo on Fatebringer if you are going to go hunt down a Fatebringer, right? And the reason why is if you're already going to be getting a Midnight Coup with higher damage output, you may as well go for the AoE potential of Fatebringer. Fatebringer with Firefly has that AoE, and you also get a flat damage bonus. But with Midnight Coup, there is another perk combo that you might run across while grinding for that God Roll Explosive Payload in One for All. The combo is Firefly in One for All. just like explosive payload, you can proc one for all, if not, a little bit easier than explosive payload. You can proc it with Firefly. Yeah, the Firefly explosion procs one for all. And this means that you get a 35% increase in damage while also having AoE explosions. This is definitely a lot better than Fatebringer's damage output when you're using Firefly and explosive payload. There is one bonus though with Fatebringer, and that's explosive payload's ability to reach out really far. And in some encounters, that is better than having one for all. One for all is great, but when it relies on the ability of Firefly to proc in endgame content, it's not exactly amazing as you increase the level of content. But if you had to ask me, if you had to hunt down any one of those three roles, it's definitely explosive payload one for all, right? Now, there are two other roles, though, that I want to go over of Midnight Coup that Fatebringer cannot replicate. Now, Desperate Measures, I was not a big fan of this perk when I played on it, and part of that's because I'm a Titan. Usually whenever I play on Hunter, it's for raids, and I'm not really getting a lot of ability kills unless I'm doing Prismatic, right? But on Warlock or some specific Titan builds, I was getting Desperate Measures a lot up to ×3, and it's pretty nice having my damage bonus without even having to use my weapon, right? It's 5% less than one for all when you're at max stacks of Desperate Measures, so it's still a nice 30% damage bonus, really good. And you're gonna have that up at all times when you're using things like Consecration or Getaway Artist Warlock. It is a great perk combo, but I would say for me, consistency is key, and I find myself a little bit more comfortable proccing the damage perks on my weapons when I use my weapons, right? Now, the other role is Explosive Payload and Kinetic Tremors. Now, this role gets a lot of flack, and I happen to agree with the flack. The flack here is Kinetic Tremors takes 6 shots to proc on an enemy. Now, if you know anything about hand cannons, you will have killed anything in the game for most content levels in 2 to 3 shots, and some enemies 1 shot with no damage bonus. So Kinetic Tremors is almost a useless perk on hand cannons. However, when you enhance it, you get it down to 5 shots, and it dramatically decreases the time you need to wait for Kinetic Tremors. And at the same time, when you start going into increasing like the difficulty of the content, I would say Grandmaster Nightfalls is the key here, or maybe like Master Salvation's Edge. Kinetic Tremors is going to be proccing all the time. So yes, I agree with the flack against Kinetic Tremors on Midnight Coup, but I also disagree because I think in high-end content, at least for me, I've gotten plenty of usage. So I would not, delete that role. If you are looking to farm a hand cannon, though, definitely I would go with Midnight Coup as the option. That is my answer. And the reasoning behind it is Fatebringer, if you do farm a time loss version and you can get explosive payload with Firefly and Frenzy, it is a nice kind of jack of all trades. You can switch the perks, but in my genuine opinion, the ability to attune a Midnight Coup and farm Onslaught, get some other weapons and some other materials at the same time, and then get multiple Midnight Coups in one run, I think it's the better option because Midnight Coup can not only score similar roles to Fatebringer, that being, Firefly one for all to replace Explosive Payload Firefly, or that being Explosive Payload Frenzy or Explosive Payload one for all to beat out for Fatebringer. At the same time, you can get some more unique roles like Desperate Measures or Kinetic Tremors. So it's really hard to go bad on Midnight Coup, and I just would not waste your time farming a Fatebringer unless you really want one for whatever reason, right? It's not a bad hand cannon. I'm not saying it's bad. If you already have a God Roll Fatebringer and you don't feel like farming a Midnight Coup, don't do it, right? They're very similar in quality. But if we're talking about which one's truly better, Midnight Coup hits harder, it has an easier damage perk to keep rolling, and it has more unique perk combos. If you want my personal opinion, the 3 roles you want to farm are Explosive Payload one for all. If you get this role, you don't really need the other ones. But if you want to keep farming, Firefly one for all is great, and I think Explosive Payload Kinetic Tremors for Grandmaster level content is a really good role as well. Get your hands on that one. Anyways, hopefully this was helpful.